Hello again. Now, Outa's court of action has seen government backtracking on the electricity national state of disaster and terminating it with immediate effect. The civil organization has received communication from the state attorney, and that was this morning, informing it that the state of disaster is as good as gone. Well, let's get their reaction now. I'm joined by the executive director from Outa, Stefanie Fick. Stefanie, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Judging by that smile, you must be ecstatic about this news that there's no longer a state of disaster in South Africa.
Yeah, no, of course. I think it's really a win. I can say it's a win for Outa, it's a win for our supporters, it's a win for every active citizen that, was shouting from the rooftops saying that this national state of disaster was not the right decision. But at the end, before we start, questioning whether this decision was made because of the litigation, whether they just reviewed their decision, at the end of the day, the right thing happened. The right thing for the interests of South Africa happened. We do not need a state of disaster to fix our electricity crisis. What we need is political will. What we need is to implement the plan that they had even before they had declared the state of disaster. Let's, for once and for all, fix Eskom and provide electricity, not just to the people that's complaining about load shedding, but to the people that does not have electricity at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, the government was trying to explain a little bit earlier. I don't know if you followed that briefing by the Minister of Copter, Thembi Nkadimeng, and the Minister of Electricity, Hussein Ramokgopa. I'm still trying to wrap my head around why they realize that they no longer needed it. Just after 2 months, because the only difference is that we're not in stage 6, but we're still in stage 4. There's not been much of a significant improvement under this state of disaster.
No, of course. Now, it's always very difficult to try and explain, what their thinking was. But let's just go a little bit back. A part of the reason why we took them to court is because we believe that their decision, 9th of February, was an irrational decision. And when we got the record, in other words, when you bring a review application, a review of their decisions, and remember there were 2. Firstly, the classification of the crisis as a disaster, and then secondly, the declaration of the national state of disaster. So both these decisions, there were, there's 2 decisions, is that, when you get the record, up until the 6th of February, 2 days, 3 days before they made the announcement, everyone agreed that we do not need a state of disaster. Eskom provided their plan. They were happy that, if this plan can be implemented, we can do something about the energy crisis. Literally everybody agreed that we do not need. Even the head of the Disaster Management Center, who then later declared the disaster or qualified it as a disaster, said we don't need it. We have enough legislation. We just need to implement it. And then literally 2 days after, all of a sudden, there's a national state of disaster. And in between, there's no facts that they consider where the situation changed. Then we need to consider that after they declared the national state of disaster, when did they file the first regulation? And then what did they do with the 2 months that they had the national state of disaster? So all of this just speak to the original point that they didn't need a national state of disaster. The PFMA makes provision for, procuring fast. This is literally, I want to say, it's about political will and implementation. And whether they want to admit it or not, whether they were forced by this litigation or not, we were waiting for an answering affidavit. They were out of time with when they were supposed to file their answering affidavit. And this morning, a few days before we were supposed to go see the DJP for a special allocation, because we agreed that this needs to be done on an expedited basis, we withdraw the state of disaster. So the decision to withdraw it was an excellent one, but I do think that the pressure that was placed on them so that they can reconsider their decision was big.
Yeah, maybe as they were trying to put together that responding affidavit, they realized that they may not have strong enough basis to defend it in court. And they looked back. I mean, whether they admit it or not, I put this point to my colleague Heidi Jokos a short while ago, who was covering this briefing. It seems like, in hindsight, this, besides having been unnecessary, it was like a mistake that government has committed, and finally, like, good sense has prevailed to say, we do have other measures in place, we do have other instruments in place, let's keep the focus through the new Minister of Electricity.
Yes, I couldn't have put it better. I think instead of concentrating on keeping a national state of disaster alive, let's concentrate on getting the plans that Eskom actually presented to Parliament 2 days before the national disaster was announced, and Eskom didn't know about this. So you have a utility that is supposed to benefit from this national state of disaster that didn't even know that there was going to be a national state of disaster.
Okay.
I do think that they realized that they made a mistake, that in law, our energy crisis is an emotional thing. I mean, no one wants to go through load shedding. Businesses are suffering, people are suffering, everybody's suffering. So I don't know if it was a, sort of an emotional, trying to soothe and saying that we are doing something about the national state of disaster, but I think it had the opposite effect. So I'm just glad that we are here and that that there's no more state of disaster, because I think we also, what it was in all our back of all our minds was that what happened in the previous state of disaster and just the plundering of resources, and we couldn't stand for that again.
Yeah, and finally, to conclude, while I have you, Stefanie, on the separate matter of the exemption, Eskom being exempted from reporting, I mean, there's been uproar as well, a unison across the board, including from allies of the governing party, like the Trade Union Federation, COSATU. I interviewed yesterday. They condemned it, they denounced it, and stuff like that. And now it's also been withdrawn today, on the same day as the state of disaster has happened. From an outer perspective, in the state of disaster thing, you were going to court. You are now dropping that case because they've communicated with you that they have withdrawn it with immediate effect. There's no longer need for any legal action by your side.
Yes, of course. They have tendered the fact that and it is now published. It was published in the Government Gazette, so it is official. The national state of disaster is no more, and the declaration of the energy crisis as a disaster is no more. So yes, we will probably withdraw our applications. They also tendered the wasted cost, and we have accepted that. And the outcome is great. What we've seen, I think, is it's heartwarming. What if civil society, and all the, business, everybody, if we stand together and make our voices heard, government doesn't have a choice. They have to listen. So maybe there's some good, kudos to government for actually listening and doing the right thing. Because as we discussed this whole exemption, the question was, why should we always go to court? Why can't government, why can't Parliament tell executive, listen, your decisions are irrational, you can't do this? And here we are. They made the right decision and we are on the right track. So obviously we will keep our eye on this and we'll again make our voices heard. But it's heartwarming to see people just, agreeing and standing together.
Yeah, unlike that famous idiom that says silence is golden, silence is not golden when it comes to matters of ensuring good governance. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Stefanie Fick, an Executive Director of Outa, who were taking government to court over the state of national disaster to deal with the energy crisis. Now that's been withdrawn with immediate effect. No further legal action is required.